Rust never slept on Vorn Station. It crept along pipes, ate through floor panels, and left orange stains on everything it touched. Nadia Holt had learned to love that rust because it meant she was far from Earth, far from clean white walls and polished floors that hid ugly truths beneath their shine. She dragged a cargo crate across the deck of Bay 17, her boots scraping against metal that had seen better centuries. The night shift suited her perfectly. No crowds, no questions, no eyes lingering too long on the way. She kept her sleeves pulled down to her wrists, even in the station's humid recycled air. Vorn Station sat at the edge of lawful space, built into an asteroid that drifted between trade routes like a spider waiting in its web. Pirates docked here. Smugglers called it home. Legitimate merchants pretended they had never heard of the place, while secretly using it to move goods that customs officers asked too many questions about. It was ugly, dangerous, and completely honest about what it was. Nadia preferred that honesty. She checked her manifest pad and located the next batch of crates. Medical supplies heading to a mining colony. Weapons parts listed as agricultural equipment. Food rations that were probably stolen from a corporate transport. She did not ask questions. Questions got people killed on Vorn Station, and she had not survived this long by being curious about the wrong things. The bay doors hissed open behind her. Nadia did not turn around immediately. She finished scanning her current crate, logged it into the system, and only then looked toward the entrance. 3 figures stood there, and her heart performed a familiar skip of fear before her brain caught up with what she was seeing. Sorcs. Dragon people, as humans called them when the Sorcs were not around to hear. They stood over 8 feet tall, covered in scales that ranged from deep greens to bloody reds. Leathery wings folded against their backs, and their eyes glowed with an inner fire that was not just metaphorical. The Sorcs could actually breathe flame when they chose to. These 3 wore the black bands of the Ashfong Syndicate around their upper arms. The most powerful gang on Vorn Station. The most dangerous criminals in this sector of space. Nadia had heard stories about what happened to people who crossed them. She straightened her spine and met their gaze directly. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her a little. The largest of the 3, a green-scaled male with scars across his snout, stepped forward. "We have a shipment arriving. Crates marked with the Ashfong seal. You will locate them." It was not a request. Nadia nodded and checked her manifest pad. Base 17, Section C, 12 crates. They came in on the freighter that docked 3 hours ago. She walked towards Section C without waiting for them to follow. Let them think she was fearless. Let them think she was too stupid to be afraid. Either way, showing fear to predators only made them hungry. The Sorcs followed, their clawed feet clicking against the deck plates. She could feel their eyes on her back, measuring her, probably wondering why this small human female did not tremble in their presence. Most humans did. The Sorcs had a reputation for violence that they had earned through centuries of proving it. Nadia found their crates stacked neatly in the corner. She had organized this section herself yesterday, which meant everything was exactly where it should be. She gestured toward the stack. 12 crates. Seals intact. You can verify the contents if you want. The scarred Sorcs examined the seals while his companions began moving crates toward a hover cart they had brought. Nadia stepped back to give them room, positioning herself near a support pillar. Old habits. Always know where the exits are. Always have something solid at your back point. One of the crates was heavier than the others. She watched a younger Sorc struggle with it, his wings flaring slightly for balance. Without thinking, she stepped forward and grabbed the other end. "Lift with your legs," she said. "The gravity plating is uneven in this section. Throws off your center of balance." The young Sorcs stared at her with something like shock. A human helping a Sorc? A prey creature assisting a predator? But he adjusted his grip as she suggested, and together they maneuvered the crate onto the cart. That was when her sleeve caught on a jagged edge of the crate. The fabric tore with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet bay. Nadia yanked her arm back immediately, clamping her other hand over the exposed skin. But she was not fast enough. She saw the young Sorcs' eyes widen. She saw his gaze fix on the glimpse of scarred flesh before she covered it. "Thank you for your help," she said quickly, stepping back. "The exit is that way. Let me know if you need anything else." She turned and walked toward the back of the bay, her heart pounding against her ribs. Stupid. Careless. She had gotten too comfortable, too relaxed in her isolation. 3 years of hiding, and she had just let a stranger see what she had spent so long concealing. The Sorks completed their loading and left without another word. Nadia waited until the bay doors closed before she allowed herself to breathe. She looked down at her torn sleeve and the scars beneath it. Burn marks, old ones, faded to pale pink against her darker skin. They wrapped around her forearm like vines, climbing toward her elbow. There were more beneath her clothes. Her back, her shoulders, her neck. A map of pain that told the story of 5 years married to a monster. Victor Kane had been charming when they met. Wealthy, powerful, the kind of man who opened doors and pulled out chairs and made her feel like the most precious thing in the universe. She had been 22 and naive and so desperate to be loved that she ignored every warning sign. The first time he hit her, he apologized with tears in his eyes. The second time, he blamed her for making him angry. By the 10th time, she had stopped counting and started planning to. It took her 3 years to escape. 3 years of hiding money. 3 years of learning which smuggler routes led away from Earth. 3 years of healing broken bones and covering bruises and pretending everything was fine while she plotted her freedom. She had been on Vorn Station for 3 years now. New name, new identity, new life. She kept her head down, worked her shifts, and never let anyone get close enough to ask questions. Tonight, a Sorks had seen her scars. Nadia finished her shift in silence, dread coiling in her stomach. She did not know what the HFY Syndicate would do with that information. Maybe nothing. Maybe they did not care about the damaged skin of a human cargo handler. Maybe the young Sorks would forget what he saw by morning. But as she walked back to her quarters through the station's dim corridors, she noticed something strange. Point two Sorks stood at the junction near her housing block. They wore HFY bands. They were not looking at her, but they were definitely positioned where they could see anyone approaching her door. Nadia slowed her steps. The Sorks did not move, did not speak, did not acknowledge her presence. She walked past them, entered her quarters, and locked the door behind her. That night, she did not sleep. She sat in the darkness and wondered what a Dragon Gang leader would want with a broken human woman who had nothing left to lose. Somewhere in the lower decks of Vorn Station, in a chamber carved from the asteroid's heart, the young Sorks was making his report to his leader. "She did not fear us," he said. "She helped us without being asked. And she has scars. Old ones. Burns and cuts. She hid them quickly, but I saw." Dravik, leader of the HFY Syndicate, leaned back in his throne of welded metal and stolen ship parts. His scales were deep crimson, almost black in the dim light, and his amber eyes reflected the flames that burned in braziers around the room. "Scars," he repeated slowly. "Yes, my lord. On her arm. Perhaps elsewhere." She covered them like they shamed her. Dravik was silent for a long moment. Then he rose from his throne, his wings spreading slightly as he stood. "I will oversee the next shipment personally," he said. "I want to see this human who does not cower." His second in command, Razik, tilted his head in question. "A cargo handler interests you?" Dravik's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "A survivor interests me," he corrected. "There is a difference." The HFY Syndicate had ruled the lower decks of Vorn Station for 40 years. They had built their power through fire and blood and the absolute certainty that they were the strongest predators in any room they entered. But Dravik had lived long enough to know that strength was not always measured in muscle and flame. Sometimes the strongest creatures were the ones who kept standing after everything tried to break them. He wanted to know what had tried to break this human, and he wanted to know if it had succeeded. 3 days passed before Nadia saw the Dragon Lord in person. She had spent those days watching shadows, counting the Sorks who seemed to always be nearby without ever approaching her directly. 2 outside her quarters, one near the commissary where she bought her meals, another stationed in the corridor that led to Cargo Bay 17. They never spoke to her, never looked at her, but they were always there, Nadia had survived long enough to recognize a net closing around her. The question was whether that net meant protection or capture. She found her answer on the fourth night. The shipment alert came through her manifest pad like any other. Cargo arriving for the Ashfong Syndicate. Same bay, same time, same routine. But when the bay doors opened, the routine ended. Dravik walked through first. Nadia had heard descriptions of the Ashfong leader from other workers who spoke in whispers when they thought no one important was listening. They said he was old, ancient by Sauric standards, with scales that had darkened from bright red to something closer to dry blood. They said his eyes could see through lies the way human eyes saw through glass. They said he had killed his own brother for betraying the syndicate and had not blinked while doing it. The descriptions had not prepared her for reality. Dravik stood nearly 9 feet tall, his frame thick with muscle that shifted beneath his scales like coiled springs waiting to release. His wings were massive, capable of carrying his weight even in the thin atmosphere of space stations. Scars crossed his body in patterns that told stories of battles survived, of enemies defeated, of decades spent building an empire through violence and will. But his eyes were what stopped her breath, amber, flecked with gold, burning with an intelligence that felt almost uncomfortable to meet. He looked at her, and she felt seen in a way she had spent years trying to avoid. 6 more Saurics followed him into the bay. Warriors, all of them, their scales gleaming with the oils that kept them flexible in the station's dry air. They spread out across the bay in positions that were clearly defensive, guarding their leader while he conducted his business. Nadia forced herself to move. Stand still too long, and predators thought you were frozen prey. The Ashfong shipment is in Section C, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Same location as last time. I can show you. Dravik tilted his head, studying her the way she had seen cats study birds through windows. You're Nadia Holt. It was not a question. She nodded anyway. You have worked on this station for 3 years. You volunteer for night shifts. You speak to no one beyond what your job requires. You have no friends, no companions, no connections of any kind. He stepped closer, his massive form blocking out the light behind him. Why does a human choose to live as a ghost? Nadia met his gaze, even though every instinct screamed at her to look away. Privacy is not a crime. No, Dravik agreed. But hiding usually means there is something worth finding. He gestured toward Section C, and she understood that she was meant to lead him there. She turned and walked, hyper-aware of the dragon following close behind her. His footsteps were surprisingly quiet for someone his size. Predator quiet. Hunter quiet. The crates were exactly where she had organized them. She stopped beside them and turned to face Dravik, keeping her movements controlled and deliberate. No sudden actions. No signs of weakness. 12 crates, she said. Seals intact. Dravik ignored the crates entirely. He was watching her with those burning amber eyes, tracking the way she stood with her left side angled away from him, tracking the way her hand stayed close to her body, tracking the high collar of her work suit and the long sleeves that covered every inch of skin below her jaw. You position yourself like a fighter, he observed. Someone trained you to protect your weak points. Nadia said nothing. Or someone taught you which points could be struck. Her jaw tightened. Is there something wrong with the shipment? Dravik moved closer. Not threatening, exactly, but inexorable. Like gravity pulling her toward an event horizon she could not escape. I'm going to ask you for something, he said, and you may refuse. Do you understand? She nodded slowly, every muscle tensed. Hand me the manifest pad. Directly. It seemed like such a simple request. But Nadia understood what he was really asking. To hand him the pad, she would have to reach forward. Extend her arm. Her sleeve might shift. Her collar might move. He was asking her to expose herself. She could refuse. He had said she could refuse. But refusing would tell him that she had something to hide, and hiding things from the leader of the Ashfong Syndicate seemed like a dangerous choice. Nadia held out the manifest pad. Her sleeve stayed in place. Her collar did not shift. She had practiced these movements thousands of times, perfecting the art of keeping herself covered in any position. But Dravik did not take the pad. Instead, he reached past it and caught her wrist. His grip was gentle, impossibly gentle for hands that could crush steel, but firm enough that she could not pull away without a struggle. Her sleeve had ridden up half an inch. Dravik's eyes dropped to that exposed strip of skin, to the edge of a scar that climbed her forearm like a twisted white snake. He released her immediately, stepping back to give her space. But the damage was done. He had seen. Who? He asked quietly. Nadia pulled her arm against her chest, her heart hammering. That is not your business. You are on my station. Everything here is my business. His voice held no threat, but the authority in it was undeniable. Who marked you? She should lie. She should make up a story about an accident, a fire, a childhood mishap. She should protect herself the way she had always protected herself, with walls and silence and careful misdirection. But something in those amber eyes made lying feel pointless. My husband, she said. The word tasted like ash. My former husband. Dravik was silent for a long moment. The other Sorks in the bay had gone completely still, their attention fixed on their leader, even though they were too far away to hear the conversation. These marks, Dravik said slowly. They are old. Years old. Yet you still hide them. Habit, Nadia replied. Shame, he corrected. She flinched. She could not help it. Dravik's expression shifted into something she could not read. Among humans, she might have called it grief. But Sorks did not show emotions the same way, and she had no idea what that subtle change in his features actually meant. You have nothing to be ashamed of, he said. The marks of survival are not weakness. They are proof of strength. Nadia laughed, and the sound came out bitter and broken. Is that what your people believe? That is what truth demands. Dravik turned to look at his warriors, then back at her. Among the Sorks, a male who marks his mate with violence is considered less than prey. He has no honor, no place in society. He is hunted by his own clan until he pays for his crimes with blood. Humans are not so enlightened, Nadia said quietly. No, Dravik agreed. But you are here now, and on my station, you are no one's property, no one's victim. Do you understand? She did not understand. Not really. A dragon gang leader was standing in front of her, speaking about honor and protection, and she could not figure out what he wanted in return. Why do you care? She asked. Dravik's wings rustled, a sound like leather against leather. Because I've seen too many broken things left to shatter alone, and because strength deserves to be recognized wherever it is found. He turned and walked toward the crates, finally examining the shipment he had supposedly come to inspect. The conversation was over. The moment had passed. But as Nadia watched him work, she noticed that his warriors had shifted positions. They were no longer guarding their leader. They were guarding her. That night, she returned to her quarters and found food waiting outside her door. Real food, not the processed protein blocks that station workers survived on. Fresh vegetables grown in hydroponic bays. Meat that had actually come from an animal. There was no note, no explanation. But two Sorks stood watch in the corridor outside, and for the first time in 3 years, Nadia Holt felt something she had almost forgotten existed. She felt safe. Silence was the first warning. Vorn Station never went quiet. Day and night meant nothing in the endless dark of space, and the station's population worked in shifts that kept the corridors filled with noise at all hours. Merchants haggling, pirates arguing, smugglers loading cargo, while dock workers shouted directions that echoed off metal walls. The constant hum of life in a place that existed outside the law. But today, the docking bay fell silent when the ship arrived. Nadia was restocking supply shelves in a storage room adjacent to Bay 12 when she heard the change. The absence of sound was so sudden and so complete that she stopped moving, her body going still the way prey animals froze when they sensed something wrong. She crept to the door and looked out at a sleek ship had docked, its hull polished to a shine that screamed money. Earth money, corporate money, the kind of wealth that bought its way through any obstacle and crushed anything that could not be purchased. 3 figures descended the boarding ramp. They wore matching tactical armor, black and gray, with weapons displayed openly on their hips and backs. Professional bounty hunters, the kind who tracked targets across galaxies and never failed to collect. Their faces were hard, their movements precise, their eyes scanning the crowd with the cold efficiency of predators evaluating a hunting ground. Behind them walked a fourth figure. Counselor Bren, the station administrator, his thin frame hunched with nervous energy as he guided the hunters through the bay. He was talking quickly, gesturing toward the interior corridors, clearly eager to please his guests and collect whatever payment they had promised. Nadia's blood turned to ice. She knew. Even before she heard the words, even before she saw the bounty hunter pull out a datapad and display a holographic image, she knew. The image was her face point 3 years of hiding. 3 years of building a new identity in the darkest corner of space. 3 years of believing she had finally escaped. And Victor had found her anyway. Nadia backed away from the door, her mind racing through options. The cargo bay exit was blocked by the hunters. The maintenance corridors would take her past security checkpoints where Bren's people would stop her. The emergency airlocks required codes she did not have. She was trapped. She ran anyway. Through the storage room, through a service tunnel she had discovered during her first month on the station, through passages that were technically off limits to cargo handlers, but that no one had ever bothered to lock. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs ached, until she emerged in a maintenance corridor far from the docking bays, and found the hunters waiting for her. They had split up. Of course they had split up. They were professionals, and professionals knew that panicked prey would run. Nadia Kane, the lead hunter, said, using the name she had shed like a snake sheds dead skin. "Your husband requests your return. You will come with us." "My name is Nadia Holt," she said, backing against the wall. "I do not have a husband." The hunter smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Earth law says otherwise. You are still legally married to Victor Kane. You abandoned your home without his consent. You stole funds from his accounts. You are a fugitive and a thief, and we have legal authority to take you back. I took what I earned, what I saved, what I needed to survive. That is for the courts to decide. The hunter stepped closer. Come quietly, and this will be easier. Resist, and we are authorized to use force. The other 2 hunters flanked her, cutting off any escape route. She was cornered, outnumbered, and completely powerless. One of them grabbed her arm. His grip was rough, careless, and her sleeve tore for the second time in a week. But this time, the fabric ripped all the way to her shoulder. The scars were exposed, every twisted line of healed burns, every pale ridge of old cuts, every mark that Victor had left on her body during 5 years of marriage. The hunters stared. "Well," the lead hunter said slowly, his smile turning cruel. "Looks like your husband missed his favorite canvas. He will be pleased to have it back." Nadia felt something break inside her. Not her will, not her hope, but something older and deeper. The part of her that had learned to be small, to be quiet, to accept whatever pain was given to her, because fighting back only made things worse. That part of her shattered like glass. "No," she said. The hunter blinked. "Excuse me." I said no. Nadia's voice came out steady, stronger than she had expected. "I'm not going back. Not to him. Not ever. You can tell Victor Kane that his property has been discontinued." The hunter's face hardened. That was not a request. He raised his hand, probably to strike her, probably to demonstrate what happened to targets who resisted. Nadia braced herself for the blow. T never came. A deep, rumbling growl filled the corridor, a sound that vibrated through the metal walls and resonated in Nadia's chest like a second heartbeat. The hunters spun around, reaching for their weapons. Dravik emerged from the shadows. He was not alone. 6 Ashfong warriors flanked him, their scales gleaming under the corridor lights, their eyes reflecting the fire that burned in their throats. They filled the passage with their presence, blocking any retreat, any escape, any possibility of the hunters leaving without permission. Dravik's gaze moved from the hunters to Nadia, to her exposed arm, to the scars that covered her skin like a record of cruelty written in flesh. Then he looked at the hunters again. "You came to my station," he said, and his voice was cold enough to freeze the air between them. "You came to my territory. You came to collect damaged merchandise that you created." The lead hunter tried to recover his composure. "We have legal documentation. Earth warrants. Proper authority. Earth," Dravik repeated. "Your Earth." Your laws. Your authority. He stepped forward, and the hunters stumbled backward, despite themselves. Do you see Earth here? Do you see any power that cares about your papers and your warrants? The Galactic Council recognizes. The Galactic Council does not come to Vorn Station. Dravik's wings spread slightly, not in threat but in dominance, making himself larger, more present, more impossible to ignore. I'm the only authority here, and I do not recognize your claim. The lead hunter was sweating now. Nadia could see the moisture beading on his forehead despite the corridor's cool temperature. She is a fugitive, he tried. A criminal. She is a survivor. Dravik moved to stand between Nadia and the hunters, his massive body a wall of crimson scales. You look at her scars and see property damage. I look at her scars and see evidence. Evidence of crimes committed by the man who sent you. Sir, we have authorization. You have nothing. Dravik's voice dropped to a growl that made the corridor lights flicker. You have empty words and useless papers and the arrogance to believe that Earth's laws extend into dragon territory. They do not. He turned his head slightly, just enough to look at Nadia over his shoulder. Do you wish to go with these men? He asked. No, she whispered. Then you will not. He turned back to the hunters. Leave. Now, tell your employer that Nadia Holt is under HFY protection. Tell him that if he sends more hunters, they will not return. The lead hunter opened his mouth to argue. One of the Sorix warriors stepped forward, smoke curling from between his fanged jaws. The argument died unspoken. The hunters retreated, backing away slowly, never turning their backs on the dragons until they reached the corridor junction and disappeared around the corner. They were professionals. They knew when a hunt had become too dangerous to continue. Nadia sagged against the wall, her legs suddenly too weak to hold her. Dravik turned to face her fully. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes had changed since the last time they spoke. You are safe, he said. For now. They will come back, Nadia managed. Victor will send more. He does not give up. Then he will learn what happens to those who threaten what belongs to the HFY. Dravik extended one massive clawed hand toward her. Kulme, you cannot stay in the open anymore. The counselor who betrayed your location will be dealt with, but there may be others. Nadia looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she took it. His grip was warm, almost hot, the internal fire of the Sorix bleeding through his scales. He helped her stand, and for a moment they were close enough that she could see the ancient wisdom in his amber eyes. Why? She asked again, the same question she had asked before, still not understanding that Dravik's expression softened, just slightly, just enough to be visible. Because someone should have protected you long ago, he said, and no one did. The universe owes you a debt, Nadia Holt. Consider this payment. He led her toward the lower decks, toward the HFY stronghold, toward whatever fate awaited her in the dragon's lair. Behind them, the station began to buzz with gossip. The HFY had claimed a human, and somewhere in space, a ship was carrying news back to Earth. News that would reach Victor Kane within days. The hunt was not over. IT was just beginning. Fire burned in braziers that lined the walls, casting dancing shadows across stone that had been carved from the asteroid's heart. The HFY stronghold sat at the lowest level of Vorn Station, in chambers that had been expanded and fortified over 4 decades of Sorix occupation. It was a place of darkness and flame, of ancient traditions carried across the stars, of power that did not need to announce itself because everyone already knew. Nadia stood in the center of the main hall, trying not to look as terrified as she felt. The bounty hunters knelt on the floor to her left, their weapons confiscated, their armor stripped, their arrogance finally broken. Counselor Bryn knelt beside them, his thin body trembling so violently that his chains rattled against the stone. Dravik sat on his throne, a massive construction of welded metal and salvaged ship parts that rose from the floor like a monument to violence. His warriors lined the walls, their eyes fixed on the prisoners, their throats glowing with barely contained fire. This was judgment. This was justice, Sorix style. Nadia was not sure she wanted to watch. You came to my station, Dravik began, his voice echoing through the chamber, seeking to take someone under my protection. You conspired with a traitor who sold information for profit. You intended to drag a woman back to the man who tortured her for years. The lead hunter raised his head. We had legal authority. You had paper. Dravik cut him off without raising his voice. Paper written by humans, enforced by humans, recognized by humans. Do you see any humans in power here? The hunter fell silent. Earth believes it rules the galaxy because it spread first, because it built the fastest ships, because it claimed the most territory. Dravik leaned forward, his amber eyes burning. But Earth's reach ends where my territory begins. And in my territory, I decide what is legal. He turned to look at Nadia. Tell them, he said. Tell everyone here what was done to you. Nadia's throat tightened. She had spent years hiding her scars, hiding her story, hiding everything that Victor had done to her. Speaking about it felt like ripping open wounds that had barely started to heal, but Dravik had asked. And somehow, standing in this hall of fire and shadow, surrounded by dragons who had already shown her more protection than any human ever had, the words came easier than expected. He hit me, she said, her voice small at first but growing stronger. The first time was 3 months after we married. He apologized. He cried. He said it would never happen again. She paused, steadying herself. It happened again, and again. He burned me with cigarettes when I talked back to him. He cut me with a knife when I tried to leave. He broke my ribs when I told my sister what was happening and she called the police. The hall was utterly silent. Even the flames seemed to hold their breath. The police believed him, Nadia continued. He was rich, powerful, connected. He told them I was mentally unstable, that I had hurt myself for attention, that I was a danger to myself and to him. They believed every word. She looked at the hunters kneeling before her. So I ran. I saved every credit I could hide. I found passage off Earth on a smuggler's ship. I came here to the edge of nowhere because it was the only place I thought he could not find me. Her voice hardened. And you came to take me back, to hand me over to the man who did this to me. For money. The lead hunter would not meet her eyes. Dravik rose from his throne. Among the Sorix, he said, addressing the entire room, there are many crimes that warrant death. Betrayal, cowardice, dishonor in battle. But there is one crime that is considered worse than all others. He walked toward the prisoners, his footsteps echoing like thunder. Harming your bonded mate, marking them with violence, using your strength to destroy instead of protect. He stopped in front of the hunters. A Sorix male who does this is not executed. He is not imprisoned. He is declared prey. His own clan hunts him. His name is erased. He is less than nothing. Dravik turned to face the hall. Humans do not share this belief. Your species allows monsters to walk free, allows them to wear fine clothes and speak smooth words while their victims hide in shame, allows them to send hunters across the galaxy to reclaim their property. His voice dropped to a growl. But this is not human space. This is dragon territory. And in dragon territory, we do not tolerate those who prey upon the helpless. He made a gesture, and 2 Sorix warriors stepped forward. The hunters will be escorted to the docking bay. Their ship will be confiscated. Their weapons will be confiscated. They will be placed on the next transport heading away from this sector, and they will be marked in our records as enemies of the Ash Fawn. If they ever return, they will burn. The hunters were hauled to their feet and dragged toward the exit. They did not resist. They did not argue. Whatever arrogance they had carried when they arrived had been stripped away along with their armor. Dravik turned to Counselor Bren. You sold her location, he said quietly. You took payment to betray a woman who had done nothing wrong except try to survive. Bren's voice came out in a whimper. Please, Lord Dravik, I did not know. You knew enough. Dravik's eyes were cold. You knew she was hiding. You knew someone wanted to find her. You did not ask why. You only asked how much they would pay. Bren began to sob. You will be removed from your position. Dravik continued. Your assets will be seized. You will be given to the miners in the deep shafts, where you will work until your debt to this station is paid. If you survive, you may eventually earn your freedom, but you will never hold power here again. Bren was dragged away, his cries echoing through the corridors until they faded into silence. Dravik turned finally to Nadia. She stood alone in the center of the hall, surrounded by fire and dragons, waiting for whatever sentence would be passed upon her. "You're no longer a cargo handler," Dravik said. Nadia blinked. "What?" "Working the loading bays leave you too exposed, too vulnerable to those who might come seeking you." He walked toward her, stopping an arm's length away. "I am offering you a position within the syndicate. Logistics coordination, supply management. You have proven yourself competent and efficient, and those skills should not be wasted on lifting crates." She stared at him. "You want me to work for you? I want you to work with us." He emphasized the distinction. "You would be protected. You would be valued. You would be HFY." The offer hung in the air between them, heavy with implications she did not fully understand. "Why?" she asked for the third time. "Why do you care what happens to me? I am just one human. One damaged, broken human with nothing to offer." Dravik was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "I have lived for many years," he said. "I've seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species destroy themselves with greed and hatred. I have learned that the universe is vast and cold and indifferent to suffering." He reached out and placed one clawed hand gently on her shoulder. "But I have also learned that small kindnesses matter, that protecting one person can change the course of history, that strength without compassion is just another form of cruelty." His amber eyes met hers. "You survived what should have destroyed you. You escaped when escape seemed impossible. You built a new life from nothing, and you did it alone, without help, without protection, without anyone caring whether you lived or died." He released her shoulder and stepped back. "Someone should have cared," he said. "Someone should have helped. The universe failed you, Nadia Holt. I do not intend to continue that failure." Nadia felt tears burning in her eyes. She had not cried in years. She had taught herself not to cry because tears showed weakness, and weakness was dangerous. But standing in the dragon's stronghold offered a place she had never thought she would find. She could not hold them back anymore. "Thank you," she whispered. Dravik inclined his head. "Welcome to the HFY," he said. "We protect our own." The words were simple. The meaning behind them was not. For the first time since she had fled Earth, Nadia Holt felt like she belonged somewhere. She did not yet know that her new family would soon be tested, that Victor Kane would not accept defeat, that the hunt was about to become a war. But for this moment, in this hall of fire and shadow, she allowed herself to hope. And somewhere in the darkness, Dravik watched her with ancient eyes and made a silent VW. No one would touch her again, not while he still drew breath. Numbers told stories if you knew how to read them. Nadia had learned this truth during her years as a corporate accountant before Victor, before the marriage, before everything fell apart. She had learned to see patterns in spreadsheets, to find meaning in columns of figures that others dismissed as boring mathematics. Numbers revealed secrets. Numbers showed where money moved, where resources flowed, where weakness hid behind confidence. 3 months into her position with the HFY Syndicate, Nadia used those skills to save them from disaster. She had been reviewing supply manifests when she noticed the discrepancy. A series of shipments from a mining consortium in the outer belt showed delivery quantities that did not match the payment amounts. Small differences at first, easy to overlook, but growing larger over time. Someone was skimming supplies before they reached Vorn Station, taking a little more with each delivery, betting that the dragons would not notice. Nadia noticed. She brought the evidence to Razik, Dravik's second-in-command, expecting skepticism. The Space Orcs had made no secret of his doubts about her presence in the syndicate. A human among dragons? A prey creature trusted with HFY business? He had questioned the decision openly in the beginning, though he had grown quieter as the weeks passed. Now he studied her calculations with eyes that held something new. Respect, perhaps, or at least the absence of contempt. "You found this," he said slowly. "In numbers." "The numbers do not lie," Nadia replied. "Someone at the mining consortium is cheating you. They have been for at least 6 months. The total shortage amounts to roughly 40,000 credits worth of refined minerals." Razik's throat began to glow faintly, heat rising with his anger. 40,000 credits. At minimum. Possibly more if they started before the records I have access to. The Sorix straightened to his full height, his wings rustling with agitation. I will inform Dravik immediately. This will be addressed. He paused at the door of her small office, turning back to look at her. You have done the HFY a service, he said. I will remember this. It was not an apology for his earlier doubts, but it was close enough. Nadia nodded, and Razik disappeared into the corridor. The mining consortium situation was handled within the week. Dravik sent a delegation to the Outer Belt, and the delegation returned with full restitution, plus a penalty payment, and the head of the executive who had authorized the theft. Nadia did not ask what had happened to the rest of his body. After that, things changed. She was no longer just tolerated among the HFY. She was consulted, included. Warriors who had ignored her before now nodded in greeting when she passed. Razik began bringing her supply problems to solve, and when she solved them, he brought more. She was useful in ways that muscle and fire could not match, and usefulness earned respect even in a society built on strength. But respect could not stop what was coming. The message arrived on a routine transmission from a contact in the Earth system. A trader who owed the HFY favors had heard rumors and passed them along. Victor Kane was assembling a private security force. 12 ships, 200 armed personnel, enough firepower to level a small colony. He was coming personally. Nadia read the report in Dravik's throne room, her hands trembling despite her efforts to control them. The words blurred before her eyes. He will not stop, she said quietly. He never stops. He never lets go of what he considers his. Dravik stood beside her, reading the same report over her shoulder. His presence was warm, steady, the constant heat of his Sorix body like standing next to a banked fire. He believes he can take you by force, Dravik observed. He believes he can take anything by force. That is how he has lived his entire life. Nadia set the report down on the nearest table. Dravik, I should leave. If I disappear into the outer colonies, change my identity again, he will follow me instead of attacking the station. No, the word was absolute. Final. Without room for argument. He will bring weapons, Nadia pressed. Ships. Soldiers. He will not hesitate to destroy everything here to get to me. People will die because I stayed. Dravik turned to face her fully. His amber eyes burned with an intensity that made her take a step back without meaning to. You are HFY, he said. We do not abandon our own. We do not send our people to face danger alone because it is convenient. We stand together or we fall together. That is what it means to belong to this clan. But no, he reached out and placed one massive hand on her shoulder, the same gesture he had used when he welcomed her to the syndicate. You ran once. You ran for 3 years alone, frightened, with no one to help you. I will not ask you to run again. Nadia felt her throat tighten. I do not want anyone to die for me. No one will die for you, Dravik replied. They will fight beside you. There is a difference. He released her shoulder and turned toward a map of the surrounding space that hung on the wall. Your former husband has made a mistake. He believes that wealth and weapons are enough to defeat dragons. He believes that we are just another obstacle to be destroyed. His wings spread slightly, casting shadows across the map. He does not understand what he is facing. He does not understand what the HFY have built over 40 years of survival. He does not understand the debts that are owed to us, the alliances we have forged, the enemies who hate us but hate Earth's wealthy elite even more. Dravik turned back to Nadia, and something like a smile crossed his scarred features. Victor Kane is bringing a small army to dragon territory. Let us show him what dragons do to those who threaten our clan. He walked to a communication console and began entering codes. Within moments, the screen filled with connection requests, replies, acknowledgments from contacts scattered across the sector. Nadia watched in amazement as Dravik called in every favor the HFY had accumulated over decades. Pirate captains who owed them safe harbor. Smuggler crews who owed them protection from competitors. Mercenary bands who owed them payment for jobs completed. Even rival gangs who would never normally ally with the HFY, but who would gladly strike against a symbol of Earth's corporate power. The messages went out. The responses came back. and slowly, impossibly, an army began to assemble. "You did not have to do this," Nadia said quietly when the last transmission ended. "You could have let me go." "Yes," Dravik agreed. "I could have." He turned to face her one final time. "But you taught us something, Nadia Holt. You taught us that strength is not just the ability to destroy. It is the will to survive when everything tries to break you. It is the courage to stand again after you've been knocked down 1,000 times." He gestured around the throne room, at the fire and the stone and the ancient traditions of his people. "The Sorcs have always believed in power. We have always measured worth by what can be taken, what can be held, what can be defended through force. But watching you survive, watching you rebuild, watching you find purpose when you had every reason to give up," he paused, searching for words. "You showed us another kind of strength, a human kind, the kind that endures. And that is worth protecting." Nadia did not know what to say, so she said nothing. She simply stood beside the dragon leader as his army gathered, as her former tormentor drew closer, as the moment of reckoning approached. She had spent years being a victim, a survivor, a refugee. Now, for the first time, she would be something else. She would be Ash Fong. And the Ash Fong did not run. 12 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the polish that only Earth money could buy. They hung in the void like a fist waiting to strike, weapons armed, shields raised, ready to crush whatever resistance they found. Victor Kane stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the distant shape of Vorn Station. He was tall, handsome in a cold way, with silver hair that made him look distinguished rather than old. His suit cost more than most people earned in a year. His smile cost nothing, but carried a price that Nadia had paid for 5 brutal years. "Signal them," he said. "Tell them we have come for what belongs to me." The communication officer complied. The message broadcast across all frequencies, reaching every ship and station in the surrounding space. Victor Kane was announcing his presence, his power, his intention to take what he wanted regardless of what anyone thought. Vorn Station did not respond. Victor frowned. He was not accustomed to being ignored. He was not accustomed to resistance of any kind. "Move us closer," he ordered. "If they will not answer, we will deliver the message in person." The fleet advanced. They had crossed half the distance to the station when the asteroid field came alive. Ships emerged from behind the rocks, rising from the shadows where they had hidden with engines cold and systems silent. Pirates in battered cruisers, smuggglers in fast corvettes, mercenaries in gunships bristling with weapons. Even a few traders who had armed their cargo vessels for the occasion. 43 ships in total. Victor's face went pale. "Where did they come from?" he demanded. "Our intelligence said the Ash Fong had no fleet, no allies, nothing but that station." "Sir, we are being hailed," the communication officer reported. "Multiple channels. They all carry the same message." "Put it through." Dravik's face appeared on the main screen. The dragon leader sat on his throne, his crimson scales reflecting the fire that burned behind him, his amber eyes filled with an ancient and terrible amusement. "Victor Kane," he said, "you have entered dragon territory. You have threatened a member of my clan. You have brought weapons to my home, expecting to find weakness." Dravik leaned forward. "You were mistaken." Victor struggled to recover his composure. "I have legal authority. Earth warrants. Prope documentation. The woman you are harboring is my wife, my property under the laws of my homeworld. Your laws mean nothing here. The Galactic Council will hear about this. There will be consequences. The Galactic Council does not come to the fringe." Dravik's voice dropped to a growl. "I'm the only consequence you need to fear." He gestured to someone off-screen, and the view shifted. Victor found himself staring at Nadia. She stood in the Ash Fong throne room, dressed in the black uniform of a syndicate officer, her scars visible where her sleeves had been rolled up. She was not hiding anymore. She was not cowering. She looked directly into the camera with eyes that held no fear. "Hello, Victor," she said, his face twisted with rage. "You will come home. You will face justice for what you stole. You will learn what happens to disobedient property. I'm not your property." Nadia's voice was steady. "I was never your property. and I will never be again. You are mine, Victor screamed, losing control of his carefully maintained composure. You belong to me. No one defies me. No one. I do, Nadia said simply. And so do they. She stepped aside, and the camera showed the full scope of the Ashfang stronghold. Rows of Sorix warriors lined the walls, their scales gleaming, their throats glowing with barely contained fire. Human pirates stood among them, standing shoulder to shoulder with the dragons they had once feared. Mercenaries from a dozen different species, all united by a common cause. All there for her. Victor stared at the screen, his rage giving way to something else. Something he had never felt before in his privileged, powerful life, fear. You can leave, Dravik said, his face replacing Nadia's on the screen. Take your ships. Take your soldiers. Return to Earth and spread word of what you found here. Tell everyone that Nadia Holt is under the protection of the Ashfang Syndicate, that anyone who threatens her will face the same choice you face now. He rose from his throne, spreading his wings until they filled the frame. Or you can stay. You can try to take what is ours. You can test your wealth and your weapons against fire and fury. And you can learn what we do to those who harm our clan. Victor looked at his tactical display. His 12 ships against 43. His 200 soldiers against an unknown number of enemies. His corporate arrogance against creatures who had been fighting since before humanity reached the stars. The numbers did not lie. Victor, Nadia's voice came through the channel one last time. I want you to remember something. You spent 5 years trying to break me. You burned me. You cut me. You hit me until I could not stand. And I survived. I escaped. I built a life without you. I found people who value me for who I am, not what they can take from me. Her voice hardened. You lost. You lost the moment I walked out that door. Everything since then has just been you refusing to accept it. But this is reality, Victor. This is the truth you cannot buy or bully or burn away. I am free, and there is nothing you can do to change that. The channel went silent. Victor stood on his bridge, surrounded by his expensive ship and his expensive weapons and his expensive soldiers, and for the first time in his life, he understood that some things could not be purchased. Sir, his tactical officer said quietly. What are your orders? Victor stared at the asteroid field full of enemies. At the station that housed the woman who had defied him. At the dragons who had chosen to protect her, that he thought about fighting. About proving that Victor Kane was not someone who backed down, who surrendered, who accepted defeat. Then he thought about dying in the cold dark of space, his fleet destroyed, his reputation ruined, his legacy nothing but a cautionary tale about the arrogance of Earth's elite. Turn us around, he said through clenched teeth. We are leaving. His officers obeyed without argument. No one questioned the decision. No one wanted to die for a fight they could not win. The fleet retreated, jumping to faster-than-light speed, disappearing into the void like they had never been there at all. On Vorn Station, cheers erupted through every corridor. Nadia stood at a viewport, watching the space where Victor's ships had been. She did not cheer. She did not celebrate. She simply watched, letting the reality sink. IT was over. Dravik joined her at the viewport, his massive form casting a shadow across the stars. He will not return, the dragon leader said. His reputation is destroyed. Word of this defeat will spread across the sector. No one will fear him anymore. No one will respect him. He is finished. I know, Nadia said quietly. I just needed to see it, to believe it. And now, she turned to look at him, at this ancient creature who had saved her for reasons she still did not fully understand. Now I live, she said. Actually live, instead of just surviving. Dravik nodded slowly. That is all any of us can do. They stood together in silence, dragon and human, watching the stars spin in the endless dark. Can I ask you something? Nadia said after a while. You may ask. Your people are warriors, conquerors. You have ruled through strength and fire for centuries. Why did you choose to protect me? A human? A stranger? Someone with nothing to offer? Dravik was quiet for a long moment. When I was young, he said finally, I believed that strength was all that mattered. That the strong took what they wanted and the weak existed to serve them. That compassion was weakness and mercy was foolishness. He turned his amber eyes to meet hers. Then I watched your species spread across the stars. I watched humans build alliances, form friendships, create bonds that defied logic and survival instinct. I watched them fight for each other, even when winning was impossible. I watched them love, even when love brought pain. His voice softened. Your kind taught us something we had forgotten. That true strength is not the power to harm. It is the will to protect. The courage to stand for those who cannot stand alone. The choice to be kind when cruelty would be easier. He looked back at the stars. You showed me that strength, Nadia Holt. You survived when survival seemed impossible. You stood again when everything tried to keep you down. You taught dragons what it means to be truly strong. Nadia felt tears on her cheeks, but for the first time in years, they were not tears of pain. Thank you, she whispered. No, replied. Thank you for reminding us what we fight for. They stood together as the station celebrated around them, as pirates and smugglers and mercenaries raised drinks to the woman who had inspired a dragon king. Somewhere in the dark between stars, Victor Kane fled toward Earth, his power broken, his pride shattered. And Nadia Holt, survivor, Ashfong, human, finally allowed herself to believe that she was home at the end.